Welcome to this webinar that has been organised by Fidra and my colleagues Jamie and Dani, who are on the call. We are really lucky today to have a fantastic webinar lined up for you, all about what are nurdles and how do you nurdle hunt. I am one of the first people that will do this. I sometimes say plastic pellets instead of nurdles because that's the other term that's used. So if I do that, plastic pellets and nurdles are the same thing, but Dani will tell you more about that. We're going to have a talk from Dr. Dani Whitlock from Fidra, telling you about what is nurdle pollution and why do a nurdle hunt and the different ways that you can use nurdle hunting this year, because this year, 2024, is a big year for nurdles. And then we're going to hear from Katherine and Nicole from A Greener Future, who've been out doing nurdle hunting and have got some great insights to share. So Greener Future are a not-for-profit organisation dedicated to promoting environmental protection through community cleanups and educational programmes and events. And they work within the Great Lakes region to create a cleaner, healthier environment for future generations. And myself and Dani, we're from Fidra, and we're the organisation that organises the Great Global Nurdle Hunt resources and is the one encouraging you all to go out nurdle hunting this year. And as I mentioned, 2024 is a big year for pellets, plastic pellets or nurdles, because we have the global plastic treaty being negotiated. There's some EU proposals going on. Our friends in the US are trying to get legislation through. So it's a perfect time for this webinar. So this webinar is being recorded. And it will be going up on YouTube. So please bear that in mind. And we also will be having a question and answer session at the end of the talks today. So please put any questions that you have into the chat and we'll get to those at the end. And I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. We will have to keep the cameras and the mute on throughout. So do put those questions and answers into the chat, please. And we'll get to them at the end. So without further ado, I shall pass over to my colleague, Dani. He's going to tell you a little bit about nurdles.
Hi, everyone. So let's start simply with what is a nurdle. Hopefully, a lot of you will already be familiar with that. But if you're not, they are commonly called plastic pellets. They are the building blocks to most plastic items. They're melted down to make all sorts of plastic products, from bottles to sachets, food packaging, and even your wheelie bins. Every year, trillions of nurdles are produced, and they are the size of a lentil. They are already microscopic when escaping into the environment, so they are incredibly difficult to manage and clean up if they do end up in the environment. And they unfortunately escape into the environment during mismanagement at every stage of the supply chain. So the infographic here demonstrates a simplified version of the plastic supply chain, and you can see where these nurdles are leaking out. Spills can happen on a variety of scales, from mismanagement during manufacturing, which can result in nurdles escaping into drains and then potentially get into the environment that way, to even large-scale shipping disasters, as there's no legislation in place to mandate how they are handled and managed at any point to prevent losses. And then once these are in the environment, nurdles spread far and wide, and they can cause harm to a range of animals. They look remarkably like fish eggs, and some research has even shown they begin to smell like food after a while because of the algae that can grow on their surfaces. So unfortunately, research has proven that they do get into the food cycle as well, because animals will ingest nurdles, including fish, which can lead to starvation and death. In addition to this, the impacts of nurdle mismanagement can be felt by local communities and fisheries. So it is a really big, serious and global issue. And just because you don't necessarily live near a busy port or a manufacturing site or even a plastic conversion site, that doesn't mean you aren't vulnerable to nurdle pollution. Primary plastic trade is global, and this means as we speak, large quantities of nurdles are being moved within and across continents. Across 5 key regions explored in our last year's global mapping report, Europe and Asia were responsible for most imports and exports of primary plastics. And it is estimated that 446,000 tonnes of pellets could be lost in the environment every year. In this infographic, the countries in red, whilst they contain no nurdle production necessarily, maybe there's no exports or imports of pellets into those areas, it doesn't mean that they're not still vulnerable, because it is a global supply chain that pellets are being exported and imported across. Their mismanagement and the lack of legislation in place to hold industry responsible means that they do end up escaping to the environment, and then no one is there to clean them up. With plastic production on the rise, there is an increased risk that the movement of pellets, or nurdles, as we often call them, along major transport routes could have a huge impact on countries that have little involvement in the plastic industry, but heavily rely upon tourism. And many of the major environmental disasters that have happened that have involved nurdles being spilled into the environment have been along really busy shipping routes. So it's something to really consider. Like right now, your country might not be necessarily have a disaster that's involved pellets, but it doesn't mean that you won't, unfortunately. So I'm not going to go into the history of the nurdle hunt today, but please do check out our 10-year nurdle hunt report from last year, and it will include more information about why we as an organisation at Fidra began nurdle hunting 11 years ago. This year's nurdle hunting campaign, as Heather's already mentioned, is genuinely more important than ever. The nurdle hunt began to raise awareness of nurdle pollution, and this campaign will again be another month-long period throughout September, but it's at a pivotal time when we could still have like a significant influence on what happens at the Global Plastics Treaty. So we encourage everyone to take part, even if this is the first time you're learning what a nurdle is. So far, over 20,000 volunteers have participated in nurdle hunts that they've then logged on our website, and this is across 73 countries, and the numbers are steadily going up each year. If you notice on our Great Global Nurdle Hunt map that you live in an area that has no hunts, or know of an individual or organisation area where there's less hunts that have taken place, please do consider nurdle hunting this September. All the data collected makes a huge difference to the project and helps prove how important this issue is to decision makers. So where is the best place to start if you want to get involved? I think every year it's really important that we make a brand new resource pack to just show you what you can do in a nurdle hunt. We have a really good resource pack this year that can be found on our hub. A link will be dropped into the chat for organisations that are new to nurdle hunting. And this includes a nurdle hunt briefing, so just so you understand what nurdle hunting is. It has this social media toolkit in that we spend a lot of time making sure that there's no assets. There's also dateless assets within that, so you can, as an organisation, plan a nurdle hunt on a specific date, and you can then promote it without it just being a general asset that includes the whole month of September. There's also loads of tips for nurdle hunting and giving you ideas. There's also should be a link to the social media masterclass webinar. We ran that last year. We had a social media specialist come in along with an NGO that Sea Shepherd Australia, who were incredible, and they were able to talk you through how to get the most out of social media when you're running an event. So please do check that out. And if you have any questions on the content within these packs and how to use that more clearly, or if you're worried about putting your logos on any of the assets, like, you are allowed to, but do ask us in the Q&A in a little bit. We'd be more than happy to go through that with you. And then I think perhaps for me, probably the most important thing that's linked in our resource pack is our ID chart. This chart shows a range of pollution you may find whilst you're nurdle hunting, and how to tell nurdles apart from other plastic litter. As nurdles are really small, they're difficult to spot. So when hunting, slow down and get close to the ground and take your time. They can genuinely vary in colour and shape so much, depending on whether they're a virgin pellet that's just entered the environment or if they've been around for a while. And that will be because of how they're moved around and they'll interact with the environment. If you're just an individual or a volunteer, you can download this directly from our Nurdle Hunt website, but it is also linked into our participant packs that are in the hub, so do check them out. And I think I've even been confused sometimes when I've seen a bio bead. So if you are unsure when you do see a nurdle, please just submit the data to us along with a photo and let us know so we can make sure we can identify it correctly for you. It's like everyone's human. It's totally normal to not know what a nurdle is, especially if it's one of your first times going out and nurdle hunting. So if you haven't been on a nurdle hunt and you want more than just a couple of assets to promote your hunt, we have a full media library with lots of images from other volunteers and incredible NGOs that can be found on our hub within our media library. So please, if you are out there and you are nurdle hunting, share your images and your videos when you submit your finds because they're so useful. And I actually personally think they're the most important data that we collect. They're so important for press, particularly if you have a really good video. And I know Green Future have some incredible videos on their own social media. Like, I think it makes such a impact. Like an image is truly 1,000 words. So I thought I'd really quickly share an example of one of our dateless assets. And this infographic here, it demonstrates how easy it is to take part in the Global Nurdle Hunt. And I genuinely believe it is. To prepare, you choose a location, you check the tides, you check the weather, you check the site is publicly accessible, and you just pick a meet point. And once you've done that, you're set really. You can start hunting, start by looking amongst the plastics. If a mound of plastic is washed up, it's more likely a nurdle or two will be found amongst that litter. Vegetation is another great area to search in. Nurdles are very likely to be blown in strong winds to the backs of beaches or the sides of riverbanks and get caught in the vegetation. So I think Megan from our team is in that video showing you all the different areas that you can go and nurdle hunt. Tide lines can be really good, especially if you've had stormy weather. Sometimes nurdles can get trapped in the strand line debris when the tide brings it in. And if you're new to nurdle hunting, I think like the first bit of advice I'd say is do your first nurdle hunt in a sandy area rather than a stony or pebbly beach. You can definitely find them in there, but it becomes easier as you become more of an expert. So I think useful items to take with you include sieves and buckets and jars to help you scoop up and explore the sediment as they're often hidden. And I do want to stress that whilst we do obviously want the environment to be clean, they're not your responsibility, so you don't have to collect the nurdles. Nurdles absorb toxic pollutants from the ocean, so please do wear gloves when you're handling them. Wash your hands if you choose not to wear gloves, and using tweezers to help remove them are also great. So back to our infographic, you simply count how many nurdles you see. We collect this data in a range of numbers, so I think it's 1 to 30 nurdles, 30 to 100. Like, we make sure they're big scales. We don't want you on the beaches counting every individual nurdle. While sometimes the project like some organisations may need that for their own data, we don't need that here at the Great Global Nurdle Hunt as a resource. Then also please record how long you've nurdle hunted for, count the number of people you're nurdle hunting with, because it really helps us to raise awareness of how many people care about the issue, and most importantly, log your nurdle hunt online. I speak to incredible volunteers and NGOs all throughout the year who told me they're nurdle hunted, but they don't always submit their data. So if you don't find any nurdles, it's still really important to log it. It's great to know if there has been pellets in that area prior to when someone might find pellets. So you might not find any pellets last year, but there might be really big storms, and then this year you might see pellets, and it's really good for us to know the movement of pellets or the arrival of pellets to a location. So I think it's first, and it's obvious, but the Great Global Nurdle Hunt is fundamentally a citizen science project, and volunteers and NGOs are what make it successful. So everyone in this call has the opportunity to make a huge impact to our project and this Nurdle Hunt this year. In a moment, we're going to go and hear all about A Greener Future's nurdle history and why they get involved in the nurdle hunt. So I won't spend a huge amount of time on all the reasons why you should be nurdle hunting, but the nurdle hunt has proven to be one of the most important tools NGOs use for engaging with their funders, politicians, and their local communities. if an important decision maker doesn't understand the issue, invite them on a nurdle hunt. We had a different selection of NGOs speak with us earlier this year, and they were just talking about how important the nurdle hunt is for interacting with funders and making people realise how big the issue is. Because when you talk about a pellet or a nurdle and you tell someone that it's the size of a lentil, sometimes you see people glaze over and they don't realise actually how much of an environmental disaster one pellet can quickly lead to 2 pellets and so on. So it's really important that you immerse everyone in the issue when you're out and about. As I've previously mentioned, we have hunts recorded in 73 countries, but we definitely know there's more that haven't been mapped. We have a central database that anyone can use for any reason, whether that's the images, the maps, the stats, the assets, the briefings. All of this is evidence to advocate for change. The more nurdle hunts recorded, the more robust and representative the data will be. So we have 10 years worth of nurdle hunting data that you can request to receive. And we even have a webinar that was recorded in December, which can help you use all the data more effectively. It even shows you how to use free mapping software to make basic maps. So every single nurdle hunt logged is more evidence that nurdles are everywhere and they're not being adequately managed or cleaned up. In this image here, I've just also got an example of our nurdle hunting data being used to help with EU legislation. This is just looking at where there is data and where there isn't. But here at Fidra, we have shared the results, and they have created incredible opportunities for us to talk directly with politicians. We've been able to talk about nurdles at COP26. 2 years ago, Heather, who's chairing this session, went to South Korea and went to the International Marine Debris Conference. We've been in part of development of Scottish Government Pellet Loss Steering Group. The PASS 510 standard was developed to determine best practice for handling and managing plastic pellets. And this project is a reason for a lot of those changes, even international agreements and tackling pellets via OSPAR, for example. But there is so much more to be done. We are fast approaching the final stages from the negotiations associated with the UN Global Plastics Treaty. And genuinely, we believe the treaty is a really, really important opportunity to address nurdle pollution. There are already some actions on nurdles in the draft treaty, and we now need to make sure that they stay there, because with every session that happens, it's more and more likely that they'll disappear if we don't keep shouting about it. The Great Global Nurdle Hunt will raise awareness of the need for international action as NGOs call on their representatives for robust treaty text to prevent nurdle pollution. So this nurdle hunt is an opportunity, and it's at the optimal time to engage directly with your country's delegations. And I think we need to take that bolder stance. Even if you're new to nurdle hunting, just taking part demonstrates you care about the issue. And of all the plastic pollution problems that we have, I believe and we believe at Fidra, that a simple solution to tackling one of the major sources of plastic pollution is tackling pellet pollution. And we need to make the most of that because there are solutions out there. So to help you, we are in the process of creating an update primer, which is another word for a briefing, and templates to help you create country-specific primers to share with your delegates to make a real difference this year. So if you're already linked with your country's delegation, please do consider the impact nurdle hunting this year could have on this global treaty. And I don't really want to give you this as a list of everything every country needs to do in order to engage with their delegates. That will be heading to the treaty negotiations, as each country will have their own understanding of their politics involved, their country's ambitions at the treaty, and their own country's interests when they're working with NGOs. But this list definitely holds suggestions. It may be that your country is really new to what nurdles are and how they could negatively impact the environment. So many organisations we speak to, even if they're heavily involved in working on marine plastic for pollution, often don't know what a nurdle is. Therefore, I think one of the most effective ways of engaging with decision makers or delegates is to invite them on a nurdle hunt. We have invited the press on nurdle hunts with us, and so many actually organisations that are probably in this call and that we work with always regularly invite the press, and this is a huge success in raising awareness and showing that people care about these issues. Our resource pack includes a press release which you can tailor to your own individual needs, so please do use it. If delegates are too busy to join hunts, my biggest advice would be share videos of all your volunteers nurdle hunting, just to show the scale of how important this is. And some of the pictures I've seen from some of the more larger scale sort of nurdle pollution hotspots are really shocking. And I think if a delegate or a politician found out that there was actually a massive nurdle hotspot in your area, they'd be more likely to start shouting and being in your corner about it. And if your country doesn't see how nurdles could impact them, I think it's really important to go back and show them our report, which maps the global nurdle supply chain. I think the greatest thing about this report is, yes, it does provide a global picture, but it also provides an individual sort of zoom in on different regions. And so when you look at that alongside our Great Global Nurdle Hunt report from last year, which shows 10 years worth of nurdle hunting and how actually it seems to be that we're finding more nurdles every year, you can quickly sort of show evidence that this isn't a short-term problem that's going to go away with a short-term solution where you just clean up one area. We really do need a global solution in place. You can also make reports for your own specific countries, whether that's after this year's nurdle hunt or if it's summarising all the nurdle hunts that have been completed in your country to demonstrate the long-term problem. And if you think including this section within our report this year after this year's nurdle hunt could be something that your organisation would want to personalise and share, please let us know. We have been talking about whether or not there would be an appetite to include in this year's Global Nurdle Hunt report a section where people could personalise it to their own individual experiences nurdle hunting this year that they may want to share directly with their delegates. So with that, I just thought I'd leave it on this page here, just expressing that we're going to be nurdle hunting the whole of September. We hope you are too. And I've cheekily added one of our most successful little videos. It was done in-house. If you guys are worried about making videos and things like that, please go and check out the social media masterclass. And that's me.
Thank you, Dani. Hopefully we've all got a good idea now of what's a nurdle, even if we haven't seen one before. So those nurdles and plastic pellet TikTok videos really do take you through it. And I think you've really clearly laid out why this year, with the UN Global Plastics Treaty still being negotiated, it's a really good chance to go out and do some nurdle hunting. But I think us telling you in Fidra, we're bound to say nurdle hunting's great. We've been doing it for 10 years. But I'm really delighted that we have Nicole and Katherine, who are joining us from A Greener Future, who've been nurdle hunting recently and are going to tell us about their experience of using the nurdle hunt and what they've done with it. So without further ado, I shall pass over to you.
Had to find my unmute button. Thank you. And yeah, I'm Katherine, and I'm the public relations manager at A Greener Future.
And I'm Nicole, the program coordinator at A Greener Future. So we are going to share a bit with you about why A Greener Future Nurdle hunts, the highlights from our 2023 Nurdle Hunt season, and our plans for the upcoming season this fall. Love Your Lakes is one of the main programs that A Greener Future runs, where we execute 100+ litter cleanups along the shores of Lake Ontario. At each of these cleanups, we do collect and categorize our litter into over 30 different categories, collecting data on each of the items found. This data that we collect helps to illustrate the gravity of the plastic pollution issue in the Great Lakes region and can provide communities with the knowledge to take action. Through these Love Your Lakes events, we focus on educating and engaging the community in taking action to protect and remove this plastic from our local waterways. Nurdles were a common item that we kept finding at some of our cleanup locations that we frequented, and at first we didn't realize what they were. Upon further research, we realized that they are, in fact, a huge problem globally, and that many others like ourselves might not be aware of this problem. Nurdle hunting aligns with the mission of our organization to engage, educate, and take action, building stronger communities and environmental stewards. As a less commonly known form of plastic pollution, we are thrilled to be able to host these nurdle hunting events in Ontario to further expand the awareness on the nurdle problem. A Greener Future has now been participating in the Great Global Nurdle Hunt for the past 3 years, with 2023 being our most successful season to date. So as you can see by this brief data overview from our 2023 season, we hosted 11 public nurdle hunt events, completed 30 team nurdle hunts, and successfully removed almost 100,000 nurdles from the shorelines of Lake Ontario. Through these nurdle hunts, we were able to engage over 350 community members and amazing volunteers to learn about nurdles and why they pose a problem. One thing that did aid the success of our 2023 nurdle hunts was our use of social media. In previous years, when we participated in the Great Global Nurdle Hunt, we were doing so in more of an internal team capacity through our own nurdle hunts on the beaches. But through our social media campaign, we were able to expand our reach and share more information about nurdles, the Great Global Nurdle Hunt, the work that Fidra is doing in our upcoming events. On this map, you can see that across the 22 locations where we conducted our nurdle hunts last fall, Toronto had the highest quantity of nurdles, but the nurdles could still be found outside of the city in different rural communities. Throughout our month-long efforts, we had many repeat volunteers come out for nurdle hunts, students coming out to earn their mandatory community service hours, and even some folks who continued to nurdle hunt independently and share their findings with us. Many of the attendees to our events had no idea what a nurdle was before joining the event, or that they even posed a problem to the environment. In the chat, we're going to share a link to our 2023 infographic that gives you all of the highlights from our programming last season. With all of that said, we want to make our 2024 Nurdle Hunt season even more impactful. As Dani mentioned, it's a very important time to get involved and take action on pellet pollution. So this fall, we are hoping to execute 3 public nurdle hunts a week throughout September and remove over 100,000 nurdles from the shorelines of Lake Ontario. We will utilize our data from previous years to select the hotspot locations for our public events, and we're going to check back at some of the other locations for independent nurdle hunts to see if there's a change in the amount that we're finding. In previous years, to search for nurdles, we have utilized trowels, kitchen strainers, and tweezers to have our volunteers and team search for and remove nurdles from the sand by kneeling and sifting through the sand and then picking them out. Thanks to our program assistant, Greg, we will have a brand new piece of equipment to make this process much more efficient and accessible at our public events. We also have plans to expand our media and public relations efforts to raise further awareness. So I'll hand it over to Kat, who will share a bit more information about Greg's Nurdle Net invention and our media plans for this fall.
Am I paused? Am I on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I was like, I can't see the unmute button. Yeah. So this device is called the Nurdle Net. So at Greener Future, we were awarded around $10,000 this year from the Ontario Trillium Foundation. And following grant guidelines, originally we were looking into purchasing the Hula One beach vacuum. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a beach vacuum that sucks up debris from the beach very quickly, and then you can separate the nurdles out from there. However, due to timelines and availability, this was like no longer looking at option. So that's where the Nurdle Net comes in. Greg, who is a new team member to A Greener Future for this summer, alongside the help from some his uncles, was able to create and design what we have called the Nurdle Net. So the Nurdle Net was built with community education and accessibility in mind. this design can be used with 2 to 4 people. And is a great opportunity for community building through conversation and discovery. And in terms of accessibility, there is the option of, if someone's unable to kneel and can't, get down to the ground, they can join with another volunteer. So that first volunteer could go sift for the nurdles, collect that sand on the beach, and then bring it up to a more accessible surface. And it can be separated together, let's say on a picnic bench with multiple people. So we're going to share in the link in the chat, a link to the OTF grant and the Nurdle Net that you can view after this presentation. And what's really cool too here is that we had actually invited the local MPP for this beach area in Toronto, and they were able to come out and learn about the project and help, build some connection there as well. So a bit more about the Nurdle Net in terms of the design and build. So it's made of 2 different panels. The first one sifts out the larger pieces, rocks, sticks, bigger pieces of plastic sometimes. And the second is a finer mesh where it collects all the small stuff, all the nurdles. And we also do find at our nurdle hunts a lot of other types of plastic, cigarette butts and just like worn down, broken pieces of plastic on the beach. And so last year, I know Nicole had kind of mentioned, we were using kitchen strainers to sift for nurdles. So they were a bit smaller and they did get the job done. They were definitely worked, but they had the holes. Sometimes it would be harder to sift the sand through, and we wouldn't be able to like collect as much sand and sift through as much. I guess, yeah. So it took a bit longer that way. So the Nurdle Net so far, it seems to really collect more nurdles than our previous methods. And we're really excited to use them this year during the Great Global Nurdle Hunt and see how this like impacts our results. So we're also going to share the builder's guide in the chat if you want to like make your own. And we will soon share this as well on our social medias and our website. And just wanted to chat a bit about the nurdle season, our nurdle hunt, the Great Global Nurdle Hunt, and our communications that we have planned for the fall. So in 2024, our communications plan is really going to focus on what a nurdle is, microplastic awareness, and kind of the hidden plastic awareness, specifically in the Great Lakes region, compared to where, in the Great Pacific garbage patch.
As Katherine was briefly mentioning, so for press coverage, we are planning to pitch kind of who, what, and why about nurdles, telling that story of what they are and just why they are important to tackle and talk about, the Great Global Nurdle Hunt and how it impacts our local and global communities. So it again connects back to that idea that everything is made from plastic and that plastic pollution problem. So we are planning to pitch to Breakfast Television, which is a local morning television show in Toronto. So this will kind of help us talk about the Great Global Nurdle Hunt as a whole and our launch event that is scheduled for September 1st in Toronto, showing an example of how we nurdle hunt, sharing the nurdle net that will be at these events, and how other people in communities can get involved. Second, we are planning to pitch to our local news networks wherever we are having these events to get more community members out, raise that further awareness, and hopefully get some events in local newspapers and online news. We are also hoping to get these media out to kind of capture the process of nurdle hunting so that people can see just how easy it is to take part in tackling nurdles in their local communities. Next, on our social media, we are planning to have a lot of fun with the fact that people don't really know what a nurdle is. We are going to go out on the streets to ask people, what is a nurdle? Do you know what this is? Is there a plastic problem in the Great Lakes? And then educate them through the various facts about what nurdles are and how it has led to the bigger plastic problem in the Great Lakes and worldwide. We are also hoping to plan a series called What Do These Have in Common? So for example, we would ask an individual what a credit card, a toothbrush have in common, and the answer is that they are both made from nurdles. We also want to make sure that A Greener Future staff are involved, and we will create some more educational videos talking directly about nurdles, the Great Global Nurdle Hunt, and the plastic problem in the Great Lakes. We also have a wonderful social media manager who is planning to write 2 articles that we'll publish on our website to dive deeper into the subjects of how different waste management systems affect our perception of the plastic waste problem and address the gap in understanding of the Great Global Garbage Patch versus the Great Lakes. Or in other words, the idea that there versus here, where there seems to be like the problem is happening elsewhere, when in reality it is happening worldwide and we are all affected by it. And we can also share in the chat a copy of this presentation if you want to come back to it at any time. The links will be added there as well. But that is all from A Greener Future. We are very excited to be involved once again in the Great Global Nurdle Hunt and test out our new NurdleNet contraption, see how that impacts our results, and of course share our results with Fidra and the Great Global Nurdle Hunt.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Katherine. And sorry that we lost you, Katherine, along the way there, but it's great that we managed to hear more about what A Greener Future have been doing. And really interesting to hear how initially you did it as a team and then you took it out to the community and social media and got getting the press involved and as well. So it's really great to see how that's grown over the years from being something you did yourself to something that was a key part of your communications and awareness raising. So that's fantastic to see. And really interesting as well that you kind of grown technology along with it from, you know, when you first start nurdle hunting, you don't need to do anything, but innovations like coming up with that new contraption to help you nurdle hunt and gather more people around is a really nice idea. So it just shows what you can do with a nurdle hunt, which is fascinating. Everyone does them slightly differently and takes away different things from it. And it's great that you've been able to use that to benefit your organisation as well. So I wanted to invite anyone to put any questions in the chat. I haven't seen any so far, but please do put any questions that you have into the chat function, and we'll be happy to take those now. In the meantime, I wanted to ask, I'll ask you, Nicole, because I'm not sure whether we'll be able to get Katherine's sound to work, but if you had a piece of advice of what was the one thing you wish you'd known about nurdles or nurdle hunting before you'd got started?
I would say that even though it is a huge problem and it's a bit more tedious to go out and hunt for them and collect them, it is very relaxing. So being by the sea or the ocean or lake, you feel very rewarded helping out globally with this larger scale problem and also protecting your local environment. So it is something, like you mentioned, very easy to get involved with. You don't necessarily need much to get started and go out and look for them. Obviously just gloves or tweezers so you don't have to handle them if you are planning to pick them up, but it is something that everyone can do very easily to help give back.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. You do, unlike beach cleans, which many of us have done, you do have to get down and go low and take your time, and that can be quite relaxing, even if it is shocking and upsetting to see lots of plastic pollution. Knowing that you're doing something for nature and you're out there in it is a positive thing, even if it is to find pollution. It's still a positive contribution that you're making by nurdle hunting, and you're allowed to enjoy it. So that's good to hear that you have been. I do have a question here from Rochelle, who's been asking, where do the nurdles come from that end up in the Great Lakes?
So similar to like Dani had mentioned, they can come from the shipping and transportation process, as well as some of the plastic manufacturers located along the Great Lakes. So as those are shipping on ships or trains, they can easily spill. At the plants themselves, they can easily spill if they are not managed properly, and they can make their way into the Great Lakes.
So is there industry around, because you had a lot in Toronto, so is there industry, plastic industry around there that you think it might be coming from?
Yes, yeah. So we have also been in contact with the Synthetic Collective. So they had done some research on the different plastic producers and manufacturers in the Great Lakes region. And we are kind of working to map those out for our upcoming nurdle season as well, to give people more of an idea of where they might be coming from locally outside of just the transport piece of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's one of the interesting things about nurdles is that most of the nurdles that we see washing up on beaches are actually from losses on land. It's not necessarily a ship going down, although that is one contributor. It's the ongoing production of nurdles every single day, and that being the biggest contributor to this issue. And then you have these big catastrophic events on top of that. So I think that's something that, just because it's on a beach, it doesn't mean it's come from the sea. It's come up from land, it's come down a riverway, and rivers can also be good places to look for nurdles as well as lakes and seas.
Definitely. Yeah, we work with the environmental technician in the town of Coburg as well. And she has actually monitored the local river and found nurdles spilling into it, which she then tracked back to the local plastic manufacturer, who has now implemented a capture device to stop them from making their way into the river. So it's really interesting to see and support those different efforts as well.
Great.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, have we got Katherine back? Is it working?
I'm back. Nicole did so well. That's everything I needed to say. But I was gonna mention about like I don't know if anybody saw in the news like last week, there was a lot of flooding that happened in Toronto. There was like one video that went really viral, and it was like Drake's apartment or his house flooding. But since that, there's been a lot of talk about just like how many waterways are in the Great Lakes region. Like there's so many lakes, so many rivers, so many like waterways and pathways. Like Toronto itself is built on a bunch of like rivers. And we also have like the highest, I think it's in Canada, but not 100% sure, but in like Ontario, definitely like so many plastic production plants. And like when you see them on a map, it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is why we have so many nurdles. Like there are a few beaches that we go to, like if you saw in Toronto, where like you could just sit in one spot and like sift for like an hour and you don't have to move.
Yeah. That's one of the things that Dani mentioned was that mapping report, and I saw that Jamie put that in the chat for you. It's worth having a look at that to see if you have plastic production or conversion sites near you, because they will more than likely be handling these nurdles and could be a source of it. So if you're interested in where nurdles are coming from, that mapping report can be really useful. We've had a question from Annalise that I want to put to Dani of why isn't it part of the nurdle hunt to take away the nurdles? Why are you just asking people to count them rather than do the cleanup? And is there any way to dispose of them?
Yeah, so firstly, it's not that we don't want you to clean them up. It's just that we want to stress it's not your responsibility to do it. I think it's really important to personally clean them up, but we wouldn't ever ask you to. And the main reason we wouldn't ask you to is that nurdles can be contaminated with harmful chemicals and bacteria. So we'd always firstly encourage, if you are going to touch them, for you to use the appropriate safety equipment like gloves or tweezers or sieves, or even the incredible device that Greg has made with a greener future, because it sounds like you go home and make that yourselves. But yeah, ultimately it's not an individual's responsibility to clean up that pollution. So of course we do, and and you end up feeling like it is your responsibility, but we need to take a step back and recognize it's not. So if you are kind enough to collect nurdles, there's several things you can do with nurdles. So you could first, of course, put them in a secure sealed container of some description and dispose of them through general waste. They cannot be recycled at that point. Another thing that you can do is you can check if you know if there are any scientists that are currently doing any analysis, whether they're a PhD student, whether they're a long-term researcher. We often will share on our website who is currently doing research in that area. I think Swansea got in touch with us last time. We've had associates in Japan and all sorts. So if you know researchers that are doing and needing nurdles, I think you should definitely share that with us, and we'll add it to our website so that others know. So you can send nurdles off to scientists. And another thing particularly last year in the UK, there was an exhibition on by an incredible artist called, I'm going to butcher his name, so sorry, Martin van den Eind. And so often artists will use nurdles that you collect to make incredible, impactful artwork to demonstrate the sort of severity of the pollution. And there's lots of incredible artists that you'll find all over Instagram and all the social medias that you can also send nurdles to. So yeah, please bin securely if you are collecting them, because otherwise they could escape back into the environment. And if you are choosing to collect them, but you perhaps don't want to bin them, that there are often lots of artists that do use nurdles, or scientists too.
Great, thanks, Dani. I've got my jar of nurdles here, and that's the other thing that I tend to use with them, collect them all up and use them to tell other people what nurdles are. And I often have a nurdle on me to show people, because it's something that we get asked a lot. So they can be really good communication tool. But I think also Katherine raised a really good point. If you find thousands of nurdles just in one spot, we recognise that you aren't going to be able to clean up all of them, and it's really difficult to walk away from that. But realistically, you can be finding, we have some reports where millions of nurdles have been found on a single occasion. So this is another reason why we're not asking you to do the cleanup. We're just asking you to log what you find, because we know that you won't be able to collect them all. And that is really, really difficult. And it's unacceptable that that situation is continuing, but that's why we want to stop this pollution at source. And a lot of our work on the policy side, and that we've been talking about with the Plastics Treaty, is about stopping these things from escaping into the environment in the first place. So making those small adjustments in the industry, which could just be putting a bit of extra equipment around something that is loading a truck, or it could be a filter in a drain so it stops getting into the environment. Could be having a simple brush and dustpan and brush to sweep them up, making sure these things are available on site if there is a spill, to stop them getting out in the first place. Because once they're out in the environment, it's hard for you to pick them up, and there's going to be too many for us to pick up. So that's another reason why we can't necessarily say that this isn't a cleanup exercise. It's something that you can do a little bit of if you want to, but we're not expecting you to be able to clean up all the nurdles that you find, and we know that that would be too difficult and too challenging. So yes, good luck, and just count them as best you can. And this is also why we have the brackets for those numbers. We know that you're not necessarily going to be able to count up to 1 million without stopping. So it is just an estimate of the numbers that you find. Whether you find one or over 1 million, it's all useful data. Right, I'm just going to do another quick check to see if there's any more questions. I'm not seeing anything else come in. So I will see if either Nicole or Katherine or Dani has any questions that they want to ask, or if there's any final thoughts from them. So Nicole, is there anything from you, a question or a final thought?
I don't believe so. We'd just love to see everyone get involved in the Great Global Nurdle Hunt this fall and submit your data on the website if you head out for a hunt.
Great, thank you. Katherine, anything from you?
I know you had previously asked Nicole the question of like, what do you wish you learned earlier? And I was like, I have that in my mind.
Great.
I think my first memory of a nurdle before I knew what they were was I was in grade 5 and we went to a plastic production plant. And like, I remember I stuffed my hand in a vat of them. I was like, this is so cool. And I wish, I had maybe made that connection earlier, had been like educated earlier in life. So I think it's cool. Like when we get like younger kids will come out and they'll be like, oh, like here's one, or like I see one there. And I think that's really cool. So I think like, yeah, just talking about it more and having like more education and like making it, I guess maybe having like sharing that, that knowledge a bit earlier, I think would be really cool. That's all.
Great, thank you. I've just seen a comment come through from Dora about there haven't been many nurdles recorded in the Adriatic Sea, and whether we know why that would be. So it could be to do with local tides, We do have some interesting findings where some beaches are covered in nurdles one day and there's not that many the next day, and we certainly have that on the beach that's out the window just out there. Sometimes it's really covered and sometimes it isn't, and this is why we run the nurdle hunt for a whole month, to get a full sort of cycle of tides in. So it is worth looking as often as you can, even to places where you haven't found them before. So it can just be the local tides and the local currents, but it can also just be the type of beaches and how easy or difficult it is to see these plastic pellets on different sand. Sometimes if the nurdles are the same colour as the sand, it's hard to see them. Sometimes if it's the same, if it's rocky, as Dani mentioned, it's difficult because they'll fall in between the rocks. So that could be the other reason. But we do tend to find that if you look hard enough, you find nurdles in most places at some point. But hopefully there are still some places out there that don't have nurdles. That's the dream, that there are places in the world that don't have this pollution. And if you're lucky enough to be one of those, please keep an eye on that area for us and keep logging the finds, even if you don't find any. Dani, are there any final thoughts or comments or questions from you?
I don't know if this helps, but I think it was Good Karma who have recently done some really interesting current research about the movement of pellets, and that was in one of our most recent webinars. So if you are interested in learning more about that sort of work, I think it is Good Karma. I hope I'm right. Heather and Jamie, maybe they can confirm if it was them. Was it?
Yeah, I think it was. So we can share the link to the webinar.
Yeah. So yeah, check that out or directly get in touch with them. It was really, really interesting data that they were showing. And then I think as I think whenever we do this webinar, and we do it yearly, and it's always slightly, Good Karma. It's always slightly different every year because we're just trying to really understand what our audience needs. We were today in the team, we were brainstorming about what would benefit you most, because it is so important that we do make an impact on the Global Plastics Treaty, and we just want pellets to be on everyone's lips and they go to that Global Plastics Treaty. So if you do believe that there is something that we've missed, or if you do think that being able to have a template within the new report that we're going to be producing after the Nurdle Hunt would be something that you'd want to then add your own organisation to, please email us and let us know if you aren't confident enough to say it in the chat. I'll just drop our email address. You can just put for the Nurdle team and for attention of the Nurdle team. And the more people that let us know, the better. Even every year, I think the project gets stronger and stronger, and it's all down to organisations telling us what they need. The social media masterclass wouldn't have happened if people told us they were struggling with social media. The hub would never have existed if people didn't tell us they needed those resources. And the mapping report that we have is one of the most useful reports I've ever seen, and everyone has used it, and anyone who has used it has given us feedback. And then I think Heather said last week or the week before, I can't remember why we never had this report. Like, it seemed like so obvious, but it's not always obvious until everyone tells us what they need. We're a really small team, so please let us know what we can do to help you, because we can't sit and and work in each individual area because there's not enough of us, but we want to help you in any way we can.
Great, thanks, Dani. Yeah, I think that's a good point to leave it on. The Nurdle Hunt is all about the volunteers and the organisations going out and looking for this data, and us all coming together collectively. So do keep sharing your images, your data, and your ideas of what you think will be useful to you as you try and tackle pellet pollution in your area. And I really wanted to say thank you to Nicole and Katherine once again for doing just that. And I hope many of you, more of you on the call today will be joining us in nurdle hunting this September. I will also just say you can nurdle hunt not just in September. So you can nurdle hunt anytime, anywhere. So if September doesn't suit you for whatever reason, you are allowed to go out and do a nurdle hunt just now. And I'm going to be on my way home and walking along the beach this evening, and I will be doing a nurdle hunt on my way back as soon as this webinar is over. So thank you once again to Dani, Nicole and Katherine, and thank you all for being here, and thank you all for showing so much interest in pellet pollution and nurdle pollution, and I look forward to seeing what you find this September, or maybe even this evening, this afternoon or this morning, depending where you are in the world. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again next time.